Football has been going, 2 weeks now, and we're already back into the swing of things. The Super Bowl just behind us, and here we are already looking forward and pushing to next season. We are right now during the NFL Combine. You got free agency and trade rumors starting to heat up. Those will be cooking just before you know it. We had a pretty, not a minor trade, but a pretty solid trade today between the Jets. And the Titans swapping some linemen. I assume that's not going to be the last trade we see during this NFL Combine week, but a lot of eyes on the prospects this week. We got our draft guru, Nick McClay, in the house today to help us go over a lot of the top prospects that we'll be seeing at the Combine and talking about what they can do to raise their stock. Go here for about 30, 40 minutes, kind of talk all things Combine, any other news and notes that have came out. But Nick, welcome back. How are we? And already pushing on for next season, the 2026 year.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to talk, football again. This is kind of our bread and butter here, and the draft is one of my, most exciting things to watch. I mean, it's where teams really, start to fill holes where they need it in the previous season. There are always guys that you never know come out of the shadows that just make an impact, just dominate the combine and somehow find their way to an NFL roster. And those are the guys that are fun to watch. The storylines that all come with it. It's intriguing to watch. There's a bunch of stories to go into it. We got a bunch of different good classes, weird quarterback class, a great edge rush class. There's a bunch of receivers that could really be impact players right away. A bunch of guys in the trenches, both offense and defense, that can be plug and play. So we'll touch on guys that we really like, touch on guys that could be down the board that could really make an impact. But just excited to get back and talk some football on the channel today.
Yeah, we got a lot to touch on. We're going to kind of just go through some of the key positions here, talk about some of the key guys. We might not see all of them participating at the Combine, but obviously we'll start at the most important position in sports. We'll start at the quarterback spot. And Nick, just your overall thoughts on Fernando Mendoza. I don't think we'll see him do much at the Combine. He's pretty much, I'd say, a 99% chance locked into the number one overall pick there with the Las Vegas Raiders. In any other draft class, do you think this is like a slam dunk number one overall pick at the quarterback spot, or do you think Fernando Mendoza is just a guy where he's going to be a solid player in the league? He's got a bright future, but he's not hyped up like a Trevor Lawrence was, or a Cam Newton, a Matt Stafford, any of those big time quarterbacks that have gone number one, and he's just kind of there where the Raiders obviously need a quarterback. He's the clear cut number one guy. Is that how you're viewing him, or do you think this is a guy that has legit Pro Bowl, All Pro potential going forward?
I think he's more of the first option that you said. He's not going to be that top tier elite, level talent. I think he is going to be a guy that, shows traits of it and is a capable player. And he obviously has the production to show for it. 16-0 Heisman, I'm not going to knock that. He just, in recent classes, obviously, in the Joe Burrow class, in the Trevor Lawrence class, like, I don't know if he really stacks up well against them. But at the same time, I don't know if that's a knock on him. I think that's more of, a touch to the Joe Burrows and the Trevor Lawrences of the world. I think this is a guy, I don't think he is going to throw at the combine. I think that was already said. But, with, the clear cut number one in him, I think it's kind of expected. He kind of proved all he needed to prove, winning a national championship, winning a Heisman. So I think this class, though, it probably has the most to gain and a lot to prove out of all the position groups. I think there's a lot of guys that have so much question marks that this is a part of the season, part of the year where all it takes is one clip, one moment that could really change your trajectory of the draft. And you saw that with Zach Wilson, and we saw that with Anthony Richardson. Like we saw that with guys that didn't really prove too much, but have the traits, have the intangibles. Like with the Ty Simpson, he doesn't have a lot of starts under his belt. Looks right now could be the second QB off the board, but he looked to be in a little bit of a slump last season, kind of heading down the stretch. He doesn't have that prototypical NFL size that really NFL teams look for. But on the flip side, you have the first 8 or 9 games where he kind of looked in total control of the game. So there's some intriguing traits with a guy like him. What are your thoughts on Ty Simpson after Fernando Mendoza?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Orlovsky even say today, if you look at like the first, I think 7 or 8 games of Ty Simpson's tape compared to Mendoza, he was saying that he was more impressed with Ty Simpson. Thing I would say was Simpson compared to Mendoza, and I think we've seen a clear correlation with this in the NFL recently. It's guys who have played a lot of snaps in college, have had a lot of reps compared to guys that haven't. Ty Simpson only having the 1 year as a starter there, and obviously playing sparingly a couple times before. What are we really buying into? Like, we're buying into 1 season worth of tape and hoping the rest works out. He's a 6'2", 200-pound quarterback. It's not like he's 6'6", 230 with all the great tools in the world. So it's definitely a down year for the quarterback class. Mendoza had, obviously a lot of starting experience at Cal, parlayed that into an undefeated national championship season, Heisman season here at Indiana. And I think he was great, plug and play guy, but I don't really think he's the most gifted, the most talented guy in the world, but he's a winner. He had key clutch drives that won against Penn State. Obviously, we remember the diving touchdown against Miami in the national championship too. So he shows that he's got that winning DNA. He's got that football IQ, obviously, with all the off the field quotes that we've seen from him and everything. It seems like he's really sharp between the ears. So he's that clear cut guy there. And I think after that, you're kind of, up for debate. And one guy that I think is going to draw a lot of attention. And he was coming into the year, even coming into the past 2 years, like was looked at as a potential #1 pick. Drew Aller out of Penn State. He is that prototype 6'5", 235. Was one of the top recruits coming out of high school, and he didn't really even play that much high school ball. He's still kind of raw. And Penn State's offensive systems haven't done him that well. He's a guy, though, that could definitely light it up at the combine. Coming off of a major lower leg injury, recovered in time for this combine. What are you expecting to see out of Aller, Nick? And do you think he's a guy that could be that player from this combine that really kind of makes some waves and makes teams have a second thought about him?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. He Drew's someone that you look at physically and you think that he's a perfect NFL prototypical quarterback that teams want, but then you look at the numbers, they're very average numbers, maybe even below average for what his expectations were. He didn't show up really in any of the clutch situations, clutch moments that, Penn State needed him. Obviously, that system didn't really do well at all, so it didn't help him at all. I mean, we saw it in the Notre Dame game, in the playoff game a few years ago. He hasn't really just improved upon then since then. And to move off of Drew Aller, there's guys like Garrett Nussmeier. There's guys like Cade Klubnik, all guys that had first-round expectations going into the year. And for me, personally, I had Nussmeier as my preseason Heisman pick. And obviously, that whole entire team as a whole had a very disappointing season for, a bunch of questionable reasons, playing through injuries. And that offense just didn't really look right from the start. But another guy to touch on who led his team to a national title, Carson Beck. He has a lot of games under his belt, someone that we have been very critical on, but someone that has a ton of experience. Again, a lot of games under his belt. He took a team to a national championship. There's still a lot of question marks that still need to be, answered surrounding his game. Those guys that we just named, all underperformed for, a bunch of different reasons, injuries, team issues, and all of those things. And when you think about last year's draft, you think about Tyler Shuck and how he improved his draft stock. Didn't flash too much, during the regular season, had a history of injuries. Also was a very old rookie, but he shined at the combine and pro days, and look at him now. So I think there are a few guys that can improve their stock, within the next few months. I think there's guys like Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier, he's someone that's, way more athletic than I think most people think. He's a little shorter, but I think he's someone that, most likely will ace all the pre-draft interviews, any questions that, front offices might ask him. He's a experienced professional already. And one thing that he didn't really show at Illinois is the deep ball accuracy. He didn't really show, how he can stretch the field. So if he can prove that he does have deep ball accuracy, he does have deep ball range in his bag, I think he's someone that could really rise his stock. And another guy that has really had no production, especially last season, is Taylon Green. I think Taylon Green is someone that could really knock it out of the park at the combine. He doesn't have the best numbers when you look at it production-wise, like I just said, but kid's a pure athlete. He's going to probably dominate the combine. The main thing in his game is his legs, but this is a time where he can prove to teams that he isn't just a runner. He can produce with his arm as well. He doesn't have that arm talent production numbers to fall back on, but this is a time for him to prove that he has it, that he really wants to show that he can be. And I mean, he's probably not going to be an NFL starter. He could be, a journeyman, a guy that really is just a plug and play type of player. But this is a class, when you're coming into it with so much uncertainty, like I said, all takes is one. So I think, overall, this quarterback position probably has the most to gain that other than
Mhm.
all the other positions. And we've touched on it before. We've seen it before. All it takes is a nice few throws, some good agility times, and you might have earned yourself a draft selection and change whatever narrative was put on them beforehand.
All right, let's transition over to the running backs now. I heard Matt Miller from ESPN say this today, and probably something that's going to be said by a lot of people leading up to this draft. And it was said a lot last year, too, about Ashton Genty, but he said Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame running back, is the best overall player in this class. Do you think Jeremiah Love is that good of a player, that good of a back? Will he be a top 10 selection? And, Genty, I think, had a bit of a disappointing season last year based off of his draft status, but obviously didn't have much support around him. He actually had a few really nice games, I remember, down the stretch. Do you think Jeremiah Love is an instant impact, plug and play, all pro type running back? Because if you're drafting in the top 10 and you're making that selection, I think that guy has to be that for that to be a successful pick nowadays in my eyes.
Yeah, I think he should be a top 10 pick. I think, there are some people out there that have, Love as the most talented prospect in this class. And it's a position that, like you said, we don't really normally talk about when talking about the best player in the draft, obviously last year with Genty. But some people I've said that think Love is right up there with Genty, maybe even better than him, which I think, still yet to be proven. But it's going to be fun to watch him compete in the combine. Like, he's actually going to run in the combine and show his stuff. So I think with this draft, how it's laid out, I think there's a nice sweet spot for him to land around the 8 or 9 spots with the Saints and the Chiefs. We know Alvin Kamara is only getting older, and they're going to want to give Tyler Shuck some help in that offense. I'm someone that was very high on Devin Neal, heading into the draft last year, but I think we saw some shades, of him in the regular season, but not enough that he can take over that lead role. So if you can get a guy like Love in that offense, I think that'll only elevate the Saints. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes coming off a torn ACL, so they'll probably look to take some weight off of his shoulders in the run game, especially with how underwhelming their rushing game was last season. So, and it's only, going to be not only going to be how he looks running, but how he is as a pass catcher. He was very good in the pass game. That's a part of his game where he can really separate himself from the other running backs. He had 55 receptions for 517 yards and 5 touchdowns in the last 2 years. So that's, an area of, need. If you need something in the backfield, that is something that he can showcase in the combine. And it's kind of, I don't want to say shocking that he's doing the combine with such a talent and all that he's already proven, but he wants to go out there and prove that he is a top 10 pick. And he's doing that by showcasing his talent, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, and when you look at the running back class too, like if you're thinking about, all right, I got a top 10 pick here. We got a big hole at running back. This guy could be a major asset to our offense. Or it's like, all right, he's really good, but I think we might be able to get a guy in the second round instead. But I'm looking at the names on the running back draft board. I think this is a really weak running back class. I mean, ESPN has Nick Singleton listed as the number 2 running back, and he was great his first few years at Penn State, but he looked just worn down and beat up last year, had several games where he was just an absolute no-show. Katron Allen's in here. He's not as gifted athletically, I think, as Singleton, but he's a really tough runner. Even another Notre Dame running back in here, Jadarian Price, he's a really good guy. I think he might be one of those guys in a better spot to have a better pro career just because he was behind Jeremiah Love. Okay. He's going to have so much tread left on his tires. Any other running backs kind of sticking out to you? Because I think this is a pretty weak running back class, but we see year after year guys fall to the 5th, 6th round and become an instant starter right away.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on him. I think it's Jadarian Price. He's someone that kind of got overshadowed by Jeremiah Love, but he's that, home run hitter type of runner with, the great change of direction. He doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires, like you said. He'll be fresh and healthy heading into the season. But one thing I think I saw that he does need to improve on is his ball security. I saw he had 3 fumbles inside the 5-yard line last season, so that's something that, he'll look to show he got better at since the season ended. But overall, he's a big-time playmaker. That threat whenever he has the ball in his hands. We saw that against Purdue. He had 9 total carries, 74 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So obviously it was against Purdue, but it just shows, that he can make things happen at any time in this. You touched on it. This isn't a really deep running back class, but a few other guys I think I like Mike Washington out of Arkansas. And maybe I'm just saying that because me and you were at the game when Arkansas played Texas and he ran for over 100 yards, had a touchdown, almost had 50 receiving yards. But I love how this kid runs. He's a bigger back, 6'1", I think 230, has some speed to him. He kind of reminds me of Zach Charbonnet, more of like a patient runner that kind of finds a hole and hits them hard to take down, very hard to tackle. He's got that good combo of speed and size and vision. But again, another guy that can improve in the ball security game as well. Had 7 fumbles in the last 2 years. So I think ball security, is job security. If you want to stay on the field, you're going to have to keep the ball in your hands. So that's something that he's going to have to improve on. Another guy, Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. He intrigues me a lot. One of the more elusive guys. Good acceleration. He's a slightly smaller guy, but he plays more physical than you would think. He's got good vision. Makes those quick decisions in the hole and hits gaps, pretty frequently. Another guy, Jonah Coleman, another guy that I think he's more of like a bowling ball type of runner. Short, I think he's like 5'8", but he's like a Javonte Williams type. Has some versatility in the passing game. He can catch some passes. Doesn't really have that, much of like a route tree. He's more of like a screen catcher and can make some plays happen after that. But another thing, you touched on it, like with how weird this running back class is. There's a lot of teammates. We already touched on Notre Dame with Love and Price, touched on Penn State with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, and then we haven't even touched on the national championship team with Roman Hempe and Kalen Black. So I'm kind of interested to see how NFL teams value those backs in situations like that heading into the draft.
All right, we talked about 2 weaker spots in the quarterback and running back. Receiver, though, is a loaded class. I think people are really high on this receiver class. Probably 10 guys, I think, at least will go in the first 2 rounds, maybe even more. Maybe 10 guys like in like the top 50 picks. We could go all day about receivers, and we'll get more in depth as we go over these next kind of few weeks. But, coming into the combine, Nick, give me your top 2 receivers in this class. Give me one guy kind of in the middle where you think he's going to be a guy that is a sleeper. And then give me your one guy that is overrated right now, and you're not really seeing why he's being talked about as a top, 2-3 round pick.
Yeah, I think right now, like you touched on, is a very good receiving class. I think right now it's a 1A, 1B situation with Mekhi Lemon and Carnell Tate up at the top. I think Jordan Tyson and Denzel Boston are not too far right behind them. But for me, Lemon is just one of those most fluid and consistent players in the class, just an insane athlete, knows how to separate, especially at the top of his routes, dangerous. Once he catches it, very hard after the catch. Could be one of the most dangerous rack receivers in this class. Doesn't really drop any passes either, has career drop rate of just 2%. So very short-handed. His size won't really blow you away, but I think he kind of plays much bigger than what he's listed at. Kind of, a 3-level type of slot receiver. I've seen names like Doug Baldwin get compared to him just because of his burst and just high IQ of the game. And not too far behind him for me is Carnell Tate, who very well could be that number 1 receiver. It's kind of hard to go against Ohio State receivers after what has gone, well the past few years. Elite route runner, always makes cornerback questions where he's going. Great at contested catches, almost 70% career contested catch rate with no drops last season. So he's someone that is reliable. And then we touched on Jordan Tyson. He's someone that could be in that top 3. He's just has that injury history, piled up over the last 2 years. When he's on the field, he can make himself known, can win at all 3 levels. Denzel Boston, prototypical X receiver with that big size, going to be an insane, target red zone monster for wherever he goes. And someone that is rising up the boards that I love is Omar Cooper. I think he's someone that, as we got getting closer to the draft, he's really getting the recognition that he kind of deserves. He's not the most dynamic or explosive type of receiver. He's just consistent. He's a chain moving type of target. He's not going to wow you with the speed, but on the flip side, you look and his box scores, not anything crazy. He only has 400+ yard games in his career, but 19 starts, 22 touchdowns. He's one of the hardest receivers to tackle once he gets the ball in his hands. Has forced 30 missed tackles, which led the Big Ten, 3rd most in FBS. So I think he's someone that is just, I think he'll probably more be suited as a very good number 2, and I don't think that's a knock on him. I just think he is more of a Robin compared to a Batman, depending on where he goes to a draft. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think, shows some shades of Robert Woods I've seen, but also if he does run in this combine, run well, he can, elevate himself. Um, and someone down the board that I'm really interested to see, who hasn't really had that much production, but is going to dominate the combine, is Brennan Thompson out of Mississippi State. He's very small, like a KJ Handler type of small deep threat, but he's going to blow the roof off at the combine with his speed. I think a team could take a chance on him, maybe early day 3, late day 2, but someone's going to want that speed in their system, and someone that I think might be a little overrated, I guess is the word I want to say. I don't want to throw that term around too loosely, but I don't know what I'm seeing out of Zachariah Branch, just with the route tree that he's really ran. He's mainly just a screen guy and can make things happen after the catch, which he does excel in, and he's great in the return game. But I think we got to see more out of him because he is a talented player. He just didn't really shine too much from what I think his expectations were.
What about my guy Chris Bell? I watched Chris Bell
Yep.
dominate a few times this year, coming off an injury though, I believe, but he gave me shades of like younger AJ Brown at times, like really strong after the catch. Also has that second gear, I think, to kind of break away. We haven't really seen AJ look like that. Didn't see him look like that last year, but watching him earlier this year, he was a beast, measuring in at 6'2", 220, great after the catch. Thoughts on him and how much the injury is going to impact his draft stock?
I really do love him. I think the injury will kind of impact his draft stock, but I think once he gets healthy, and probably won't be too soon in the first year of his season, I think he's someone that can make an impact. He's a bigger receiver, like you said, compared to AJ Brown, big bodied, physical receiver. I think he's someone that once he does get healthy, he'll show some shades of being an impact player. And then we didn't even touch on KC Concepcion. I think he's right in the mix as well. He's more of an inside out, run after the catch type of guy, good speed to him, but has struggled with the drops. I think if he can improve upon that, people are going to be happy to have him on their team. There's guys like Chris Basil from Tennessee, 6'5", 200, another guy that has the dangerous combo, size and speed. If he can put it all together, he could be a problem. And another guy that had high expectations, Antonio Williams, heading into the year. I think Clemson had like 5 guys that were projected to go first round. Antonio Williams was one of them. I think he's a little on the smaller side, but a great athlete, great route runner. Again, more of a slot guy to me, but finds the open and finds the soft spots in the zones. He understands the game pretty well. So I think those are guys that you got to look for heading into the combine and heading into the draft.
All right, let's go over to before we switch to defense real quick. Let's go over to the tight end spot. Anybody outside of Kenyon Sadiq, who I think pretty widely considered a first-round pick. Any other tight ends right now that are sticking out to you? Eli Stowers is a guy that was a pretty good tight end at Vandy this past year. Is it Sadiq or bust for you at the tight end, or do you think it's a pretty deep draft class this year at that spot?
I think Sadiq's easily at the top, but I think there is a bit of a gap after him, but I don't think that there's too big of a drop-off. I want to say I like Eli Stowers. He has a ton of upside, good footwork. I think only thing with him is he's had a few injuries in his career. Probably not someone that you want to play in line consistently. For as tall as he is, he doesn't really play with that strength. He's more of just like a natural pass catcher, huge catch radius. I think another guy is Max Clare from Ohio State, versatile guy, good route runner, good at the contested catches too. I think someone down the board, maybe Oscar Delp. He was a very high recruit guy, but didn't have that much production at Georgia, bigger target. Pretty rare athletic traits for a guy of his size, but just again doesn't have the production or stats to really back it up. And I like Michael Trigg out of Baylor. He's someone that is kind of like just a matchup problem with his combo of size, strength, and speed. One of the better rack tight ends in this class, but has 7 drops last season, so that's not too good of a look. Someone that will make highlight tape catches, but drops the easy ones too. So I think those guys, and down the board, I'm looking at Trigg for someone in this class that I really like.
All right, let's get over to the offensive line now real quick, and then we'll get over to the defensive line. I think this is a really strong offensive line class. I like the offensive tackles with Fano out of Utah, Francis Malioga out of Miami. Caden Proctor's a guy who past couple years has been talked about as a potential top 10 pick. Give me your just overall not prospect by prospect, but overall thoughts just on this draft class. Tackles, guards, center. This is a really strong class for teams that to be able to improve their interior, or do you think this is more so a perimeter kind of driven draft?
No, I think this is a good draft to kind of build up the trenches. I think this is a draft where you may draft someone as a tackle and they might move to the inside. This is a class that is very versatile. Probably not someone like Malgoa. Like I think he's someone that's going to stay on the outside, but Fano is athletic. He can play anywhere. I think even his teammate Caleb Lomu, he's up there. One of the better pass protectors in the class. I think there's a lot of guys in this class that can really move around, and whatever draft or whatever team drafts them, I think they're going to find a way to get him on the field. There's a couple plug and play guys, like Francis, like Spencer Fano, like Caleb Lomo. I think, Penn State has, Vega Ione. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think he's someone that can go out there and be a plug and play guy. Oregon, I think Emmanuel Pregnon, he's someone that can be plug and play guy. I think there is guys at the top of the board that can really make an impact from the inside and even on the outside in this class.
All right, let's switch over to the defensive line now. It's a spot where I think it's always my kind of most fascinating spot in the draft. Defensive line edge. That's where I get my most intrigue. I saw right before we hopped on, actually, David Bailey, I think, ran a 4.5 as an edge rusher at 6'3", 250 pounds. We'll start on the edges, Nick. I think this is a really, really good edge rusher class. David Bailey, Ruben Bain. His arm length actually came back better than expected in the measurements. He's a guy that was just a game wrecker all year, but not the most ideal physical measurements. Keldrick Falk's a guy a little bit raw. He kind of reminds me of some of those A&M pass rushers from last year that have all the tools but not quite the production. Mesidor, we saw him in Bain be game wreckers all year. TJ Parker was projected as a top 5, top 10 pick coming into the season. Tell me about this edge class, and do you think that's actually the strongest position in the draft this year?
Yeah, I think this is definitely the best position group of this class. I mean, we can go on and on about all the players in this position. I think, obviously you have guys like Ruben Bain and David Bailey at the top, but then you look at, Arvell Reese and where is he going to play? Where will he play in the NFL? Is he going to be that off-ball linebacker or edge rusher? And people, have been throwing out names like Michael Parsons to compare it to. And, I'm one that has done that. But I think when you make player comparisons, it's not really career projections. I think it's kind of more play style and similar traits. So, just like Parsons, Reese has that versatility and athleticism to play kind of wherever and be productive. But I think it's kind of, unfair to Reese to put such high expectations, like living up to a Micah Parsons on him so early, when we don't specifically know just yet where he'll line up. And that also depends, what team drafts him, with how that defense looks, before he even enters the building. But with Reese, you just have a guy that's a freak athlete. He only has a 1-year starter under his belt, former safety recruit. So he has that limited experience, but he has all the tools, all the traits that shows that he can be a legitimate game wrecker. He's still only 20 years old. So I think he's, I don't want to say raw, but he still has stuff to learn. And it's kind of just like, where can you best maximize his potential without kind of overloading stuff on his plate? And then you talk about, his teammate is more of a linebacker, but Sonny Styles. He's someone that was recruited as a safety, made the move to linebacker with pretty much ease. He's a 6'5", 245. That's not pretty rare for a guy with his athletic ability. He has high IQ, play recognition. I think as a former safety, he's going to be great in coverage as a linebacker. So I think with how linebackers are kind of viewed in today's game, there aren't too many of them like Styles. He's someone that kind of sheds blocks, looks to hit, and like an old school type of guy. And not even to touch on Ruben Bain, tape doesn't lie when you watch Ruben Bain play. You don't need to look at his arm length. You go out there and watch him play. He's a game wrecker. Every single game that this guy plays, he's causing chaos for opposing offenses. He plays like a guy that just, doesn't care who he's up against. He's going to beat you in any possible way. I think this is, a case where, arm length, that measurables, it doesn't mean anything. The production, in all of his college career, he had 83 total pressures last season, most in a single season in FBS since 2017. So I think he's someone that you don't look at measurables. You just look at tape and say, I want this guy on my defensive line causing chaos.
Yeah, I love watching Ruben Bain. I think he's a guy, measurements be damned. You just watched him play all season, and he's a guy that's just consistently popping off the screen. So, love that player. Excited for him. I think he's a guy too that's going to play with a chip on his shoulder. How about defensive tackle Peter Woods? We talked about it earlier with Antonio Williams and Clemson, TJ Parker, Clemson. Peter Woods is a guy coming into the year as a defensive tackle, was talked about as a top 10 pick, and I think he's still viewed as a first rounder. But that Clemson team as a whole really just kind of disappointed. You have Lee Hunter, another guy who was the main force in the middle on that Texas Tech defensive line. Caden McDonald out of Ohio State. It's a guy that was a game wrecker as well. How's this defensive tackle class stack up? Because that's another spot where I think teams are starting to invest higher picks in more and more after seeing players like Deron Payne, Aaron Donald, Jalen Carter, like guys like that can really wreck the game from the interior. What are your thoughts on that spot this upcoming season, this upcoming draft class?
I still think I have Peter Woods as my top, interior guy. And we touched on it already. Clemson was supposed to have, 5 top picks, and they might have, 2 top picks with Woods and TJ Parker on their defensive line. I think Woods is someone with more of, a high floor type of player. And he's played, all over the line of scrimmage on the defensive line. He plays with that power. He has that short quickness for a player of his size that really kind of separates him from the rest of, the field. I think you touched on it like Lee Hunter. He has that great first step for a player of his size at 6'4", 320 pounds, but he has that experience too. 3-year starter under his belt. He knows the game and just, a powerful game-wrecking type of player. And Caden McDonald, he could be one of the better run stuffers in this class and probably will be up there with one of the stronger prospects heading into the draft. Pretty much immovable on the line of scrimmage. Just dominates, at the point of attack, just pure natural strength. And then Caleb Banks is someone that's going to measure out insane. I think he's 6'6", 330. Had some injuries, throughout the season, which kind of can, decrease his draft stock, but he's healthy now. Combine is a shot for him to rise it back up. He's, got the size and athleticism that is very rare for a player of his size. Can move very well. And one guy that, I kind of have to talk about is my boy, Dominique Orange from Iowa State. He is unbelievable. I loved watching him at Iowa State. One of the few, bright points on that team. He is someone that could have the best overall combo of upper and lower body strength in this class, and he's experienced as well. He knows the game of football, more of that, run stuffing nose tackle, so he doesn't really have the production numbers that really you look at, but I think this is a guy that can make a difference right when he steps into the building.
All right, let's go to the secondary now to kind of wrap it up. Secondary as a whole, corner, safety. This is a strong class. You got a couple really big names. Caleb Downs, maybe like up there with Jeremiah Love is potentially the best player in the class, but is somebody going to draft a safety top 5? Corners. Mansour Delane out of LSU is a guy whose name's been popping off for a while. You got the 2 corners out of Tennessee. Avion Terrell's a guy we've heard for a while. Hell, D'Angelo Pons is the best corner, maybe the best defensive player on the best team in the country all year, and he's only 5'9", 170. He's getting dinged for his size, but just an overall playmaker. Thoughts on the secondary as a whole, Nick, kind of to wrap us up before we head out and look forward to next week and starting to dive deeper into some of these positions?
Yeah, I think there are a few guys that could be, plug and play impact type of guys. To start with the cornerbacks, I'm very high on Mansour Delane and Jeremiah McCoy, 2 guys that are very smart football players, very high IQ of the game. Delane's just more of like that physical, athletic type of player, very reactive, that play recognition. He has the high IQ, like we just said. He understands where to be at the right time, doesn't, commit a lot of penalties either. Once a ball is in the air coming his way, he's not, afraid to get that ball. He's not, obviously, they had a disappointing season for LSU, but he was one of the few bright spots in that defense. And then you touch on Jeremiah McCoy. He might even be my favorite corner in this class. We haven't seen him play since 2024 with that torn ACL, but if you look at that tape from 2024, it jumps out at you. He's got the great size, speed, and I believe he's only going to be 20 years old on draft night. So if he can come back healthy, like that 2024 self, he's had some time to heal. I think he could be a steal for a team in this draft. Had 4 picks, 9 pass breakups, and was first team all SEC in that 2024 season. And then You look at guys down the board like Avion Terrell. We already touched on the Clemson guys. I think he's kind of getting overshadowed by that terrible season that Clemson had, but he's a great athlete, good eyes in zone coverage. Kind of reminds me of like a Kyler Gordon, undersized that plays with a lot of aggression. And then, Jermod McCoy's teammate, Colton Hood, he could be a game changer right away, more of like an aggressive guy, physical guy. Kind of shined at the Senior Bowl, which is making him rise up rankings. Not the most gifted athlete, has kind of sloppy things on tape like discipline, but I think that could be helped in an NFL system. And then guys just down the board from a cornerback standpoint, Keith Abney from Arizona State, not the biggest, but had 5 picks, 17 pass breakups in the last 2 seasons. Chris Johnson from San Diego State, an elite athlete, will probably shine in the combine. Better in kind of off coverage, I think. I think in man, he can keep up, but I think he's better in that, just let him roam around in the zone. And then Brandon Cease from South Carolina, he's someone that's going to pop off at the combine. He's one of the quicker guys in this class. He'll probably have, a crazy 40 time, more of a raw prospect. Still needs to develop, but D'Angelo Ponce, Keontae Scott, 2 guys that really rose their stock in the college football playoff. Caleb Downs, clear number 1 safety for me, has all the type of instincts that you look for in a box safety, and he has the experience coming from a Nick Saban coach Alabama team where he started as a freshman, so that's pretty impressive. You look down the board, more guys like Emmanuel McNeil. Warren from Toledo has 11 career forced fumbles, which is crazy. Obviously, he's a guy at Toledo, doesn't play the craziest talent, but you watch him, the tape shows, and I think that is something that it doesn't really look for the helmet. You don't look for the team he's on. If the film doesn't lie, the kid can flat out play.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that was kind of a crash course. We were already in the midst of the combine, but we're going to start getting each week here coming up, position by position, go hit on probably some quarterbacks, do a deep dive on them next week, get into the running backs, receivers, and before you know it, the NFL draft will be here. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, please like, please subscribe, and we'll talk next week.